Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the journey of the gorgeous Venus through the very proud sign of Leo, which begins on June the 5th, 2023. Now usually Venus glides through each zodiac sign for around about 28 days. But this is going to go on through to the 9th of October, so that's 4 long months. Also there's a retrograde which causes this extension, and that begins on July the 23rd when Venus is at 28 degrees and 36 minutes in Leo, and that comes to an end on the 4th of September at 12 degrees and 12 minutes. So what is Venus about? It has its earth rulership through Taurus, its air rulership through Libra. What does it represent in the sign of Leo? What will the retrograde mean? What does the event chart tell us? Well, we do have a very powerful set of influences. The most intense one is that Pluto is in opposition with Venus exactly when this event begins. So therefore, that's definitely going to provide a backdrop for the whole of these 4 months. And Pluto is very much about power, and when Venus is in the mix, it can be power around money or sex or desires, so leverage. So we need to explore that. But also there is essentially a grand fixed cross, because we have Jupiter in the North Node in Taurus, and we have the South Node in Scorpio feeding into that opposition between Venus and Pluto. So that's quite complex. So I'm going to share with you the event chart in terms of the overall zodiac that we can all relate to. Venus in Leo could be seen as being very much to do with speculation, whether it's around money or our love lives, certainly about going for the things that give us a lot of pleasure, but also the more technical natal event chart sees Venus in the 10th house, so right at the top of the chart, so very influential. So much to share with you. We also have 3 lots of Jupiter squaring with Venus, 2 of Uranus, and perhaps most notably we have a cazimi which occurs when Venus sits in the disk of the Sun on the 13th of August, and that's going to be incredibly exciting. If you're new to my channel, it's lovely to have you with me. Please share any thoughts you have, but I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for joining me once more. If you'd like to get your free written daily horoscope fired to your device each morning, I've written these for nearly 3 decades. Please see the subscription link below. Now, if you would like to further your understanding of astrology and really gain much greater insight into how your life is evolving, if you do give me 3 pieces of personal birth data, of time, date and place of birth, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. If you would like your forecast for the next year as well, there's 30% off, and these charts are totally unique to you and will give you seeing insights. If you don't know your time, but you're really attuned to your sun sign and the progress of it, I could produce the same reports but not including the ascendant, with an assumed moon at midday. And these are proving very popular because so many people don't know their time. But I feel they're much more realistic than noon charts, which actually can cause a lot of confusion. So please see the link below. Now, once I've gone through outlining what Venus in Leo means, the retrograde means, the influence of Venus itself, and also the event chart, solar and natal, I'm also going to share each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your sun or ascendant, and they will come at the end of this video. So this event begins on June the 5th and it goes on through to October the 9th. But when was the last time that Venus was in a retrograde? Well, it was actually in the Earth sign of Capricorn, and it was retrograde between December the 10th and January the 29th in year 2022. Now the next one is going to be also cardinal along with that Capricorn influence, and this is going to be from March the 1st to April the 12th in year 2025, but it will terminate back in the water sign of Pisces, so it's going to inverse. That just gives you a little bit of an idea of when we can expect the next one. Now let's just explore what Venus means through its Earth rulership of Taurus. So very much about everyday money. Can be about self-worth, value, sensuality, fashion, jewellery, good food and wine. If you're a maker or a creator, you've probably got some Taurus in your chart. Or if you're someone who really enjoys home cooking or home growing, because the sign of Taurus can really like luxuries or very aesthetic, basic, earthy pursuits. So there can be that paradox. Now through its air rulership of Libra, obviously very much about relating, harmony, partnership, conciliation, can be about cooperation, diplomacy, charm, appearances, but critically also superficiality. So we just need to be truthful about that, and I have a Libran ascendant. But what about Venus and Leo? Well, this is where we are likely to want to be very romantic. It can be, and Leo people generally can also be very, very generous and warm-hearted. I think if someone's got Venus in their natal chart and it's not retrograde, which can make people much more reserved about close relationships or even pursuing their desires, whether it is romantically or financially. People who've got Venus in Leo, when you become the center of their universe, they really can make you feel absolutely unbelievable. Also, status can mean quite a lot. So I think we all need to be aware that some of that may actually feed into the wider astrological public through this event. And we can also be drawn towards people who have some kind of aura about them that's very successful or very glamorous, or has some kind of nobility, some kind of regality about them, being the sign that's governed by the sun. So Venus in Leo can encourage us to mix and mingle, be more sociable, but mix also with people that we feel are good to be around. So it's very enhancing for our sense of self if we're with people who we feel good about themselves. Also, anything to do with taste and style, which is quite Libran in some ways, that can also be very important along with appearances. But I also feel that the sign of Leo in the overall view of the zodiac is very much about risk and speculation, which is quite interesting because it's a fixed sign, and people with the sun in Leo don't necessarily find it easy to get things off the ground. But because Venus is going to be squaring up with Jupiter 3 times and Uranus, both in Taurus, they're very much about everyday money. And of course, that's the earthy rulership of Venus coming into play. So I feel our desire to enjoy good things over the next 4 months is definitely going to be heightened. And because it's been so tough for so many people around everyday finances over the last months, if there are little treats or things we can spoil ourselves with, or someone's very generous to us, it could be something that we really appreciate. But of course, Leo is a fire sign, and Venus can be about romance. So we could encounter someone who we really feel a sense of warmth and affection for. So that's going to be very interesting indeed. So let's just tease open the solar event chart. So this is where we're thinking, we're reimagining the event based on the overall zodiac with the ascendant at 0 degrees Aries. And obviously that puts Venus into the 5th house, but also we've got Mars there, and in fact Venus and Mars are going to be collaborating not quite together in a conjunction, but in the first 10 days of July they're close enough to have a real impact. So that can be a really positive time to look forward to. But if we look at the midpoint on the chart between Venus and Mars, obviously in Leo, that is actually forging a very tight right angle to Jupiter. So I think we need to be aware that Jupiter can be about excess. I think that housed in Taurus, it can slow down the more extravagant desires of Jupiter. But if we do enjoy in the northern hemisphere parties and social get-togethers, good food and good wine, it may be hard to keep to any kind of diet plan. But of course we can see in house 11 that we do have Pluto just preparing in its retrograde to re-enter the sign of Capricorn, which will happen on the 11th of June. And it's going to be back in Capricorn through to the 21st of January 2024. But that opposition is absolutely exact. So we really need to explore that. So in terms of all of us, Pluto's in the sign of the collective, and it's to do with the group, the network, and how things affect us overall. Whereas Venus is in the sign of the individual, and with Mars there, we could pursue things where we really set our heart on a person or a possession or some kind of business idea where our desire to get what we need could go against what other people feel is necessarily a well-proportioned desire. And that's where Pluto's opposition with Venus, but also square with Jupiter in the North Node, comes into play. Now I'm just going to share with you now briefly the event chart based on Placidus. As ever, my charts are based on Greenwich and Universal Time, so all of us in the world can relate to Universal Time. You could also have astrologers based where you are, so it's in the States or in Eastern Europe or Australia, who could be using local time that will produce a different chart. But you can see that Venus, Mars, and that Venus-Mars midpoint right at the top of the chart, the 10th house. So this is how we're all elevating our desire in terms of our goals and aims and ambitions. Status, it's very Capricornian really, and it's about perhaps creating the kind of reality we want that really satisfies those desires in terms of recognition for our talents, the more creative side of Venus, recognition or forging a more formal arrangement around certain relationships. But you can see Pluto's in house 4, very much about property, security, our immediate environment. So I feel that our desire to go for what we want could have an impact on our sense of security, but it could affect us all. So I think this is going to be a time, particularly with Jupiter in the North Node in the 8th house of longer term money, where we need to be aware of not overspending, not overextending ourselves in order to get what we crave. So craving, we all have our cravings. I just had a chocolate biscuit, which I couldn't resist. And those kind of innocent cravings maybe something we can go with, but if we're craving somebody who maybe is, you know, already in another relationship, or we're craving lusting after a better financial outcome where we then tread on other people's toes, that's where the energy of Pluto and that square, particularly with Jupiter, which can give people a kind of ideology of going for what they want no matter what anyone else feels. So we just need to be conscious of that. So let's just have a look at the big aspects that are coming. So we know about Venus in opposition with Pluto, and I've already mentioned that Jupiter is going to be clashing 3 times. So let's just call that out straight away. So the first one that's exact is on June the 11th. But in week 2, they're broadly within 3 degrees. Now this is one of those squares that actually can be very lovely. So why not have a nice time? Why not have a gathering where we enjoy good food and good wine? But as I said, this can really be a challenge for our sense of self-discipline. But the next time that we get that square with Jupiter is in August, and it becomes exact on the 22nd, but from the 17th to the 31st within 3 degrees. So the second 2 weeks of August. Then in September, we've got the first 3 weeks of September, Venus is squaring Jupiter, and it's exact on the 17th of September. So you can see that our desire mode is really going to be ramped up by Venus's journey through Leo. But let's now have a look at Uranus. So the first 10 days of July, within 3 degrees, and exact on July the 2nd. Uranus also in Taurus, but a much more disruptive and changeable influence. This is the planet of higher truths, so we may need to grapple with some of our higher truths about resources. And then that is repeated again in the last week of September, and it's exact on the 29th, so that only happens twice. But I did tell you before about the retrograde, so that begins on July the 23rd, and that's at 28 degrees and 36 minutes, goes on through to September the 4th at 12 degrees and 12 minutes. What does that mean? Well, I feel that Leo energy can be very dignified, can be very proud, it likes attention. No, it doesn't like attention, it likes to be adored. It can't be adored? Well, at least respect me. Even if you don't like me, you must respect me. So relationships will take on a deeper mode, and also our financial affairs will take on a deeper mode for those 44 days from July the 23rd. So despite the fact that Jupiter's pushing us to be more frivolous, the retrograde to Venus is asking us to be more dignified. And at the end of the day, Leo is a sign of leadership, even though it's not a cardinal sign. So we may have some disappointments around finances during that retrograde, but also around love relationships. So you can see there's a lot of desire threaded through this whole event, particularly with Pluto and Jupiter in the mix. And so we need to prepare ourselves that not everything we want may necessarily come to pass, and therefore be very realistic. But the cazimi, which happens between Venus and the Sun on the 13th of August, is one of the most magical events of the whole year. That's indisputable, because this turns up the burners, the afterburners, despite the fact that Venus is in a retrograde. So that can actually bring some rewards, bring some positive interactions. If we're wanting to meet somebody who really makes our pulse race that much quicker, what the retrograde could be telling us is don't be too deceived by appearances, particularly about what someone does for a living, or earns, or drives. Obviously, we're drawn to someone through our senses, so their appearance, or how someone really may even smell, which is a very sensual part of Venus's energy through Taurus. Those things, you know, are indisputably important, but I wouldn't make too many superficial judgments while that retrograde's going on, and especially on the cazimi. Now, the conjunction, and in traditional astrology they would argue from the 11th through to the 14th, where it's applying and then separating, they would say that's combust, and Venus is actually weakened quite radically by the overpowering energy of the Sun in its home zone of Leo. But because I come from a traditional background, I see that as a conjunction, and of course it depends on where in your natal chart this Venus transition is playing out, and where the retrograde plays out as well. But I feel that once Venus enters Virgo on the 9th of October, we all will be so much more aware of our desire, whether it is around sex, money, relationships in a more romantic sense. And because, of course, Venus is in its full in the sign of Virgo, so it's very cool and much more detached. And we might actually be quite pleased to reach that point, because it can help to earth us down. So that's going to be very interesting for us. But so my prognosis for this particular Venus season in Leo is that it can be very exciting. There's lots of good things that we can all embrace, but we just need to be mindful of the role of Pluto and Jupiter and the retrograde. Now, please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs to give you a flavour of what you can expect from Aries through to Pisces. So Aries, of course, Leo is a sister fire sign to you, and the fifth house really can be where you construct your stuff in a very self-confident way, particularly when Venus and your ruler Mars are pretty close together in the first 10 days of July. So a sense of excitement and anticipation, I feel, is really there for you. But that doesn't change the fact that you do have Saturn still in house 12, which is asking you to grapple with some very deep issues that could relate to the past. And having this energy in house 5 is very much about being much more in the moment, particularly when the sun moves into Leo on the 23rd of July. So you're really going to get some uplift from that moment. But I feel there is a sense that you can move into things that are fresh, exciting, perhaps around a relationship, but there could be some kind of separation or a need to come to terms with a past relationship or situation. If you've done that, you're going to be much more available to join in and enjoy this wonderful transit despite the retrograde. Now, Taurus, of course, Venus is your ruler. What is likely to be the case over the next 4 months is you will gain a lot of pleasure from your home or from very peaceful environments. Now, if you are someone who has a great love of travel, going somewhere that is very tranquil and nurturing could be just what you need, because you have appreciation of the good things in life more than perhaps any other sign. But I think in Leo, you need to enjoy those things in an environment that's very soothing and calming. If you are someone who enjoys things like spa days, massages, essential oils, candles, long soaks in the bath with Epsom salts, this is all going to be perfect to embrace this event. Now, in terms of a romantic possibility, I feel if there is someone you're drawn towards, it needs to be someone that understands you at an emotional level. If you're in a relationship at the moment where that is lacking, that essential simpatico, this is what you're going to need to grapple with. And because Jupiter and also initially the North Node, but Uranus and Mercury, they're actually in a conjunction on this event, are all squaring up to the energy in Leo. I feel that if you feel that something isn't working as you want, you're going to be much more assertive about expressing that, despite the fact that Venus, through its rulership of Libra, can look for a more diplomatic outcome. But if you have to stand in your power, I think you can do it. Now, Gemini, for you, having Venus in your third solar house is really exciting because it tunes in to the energy of your sign. The third house energy, Gemini vibe, is very quick, flexing, brilliant at articulating ideas. Also loves chat, can be flirty. Obviously Leo is very proud, not necessarily loud, but certainly grand. If you want to grace any kind of social function, I think you could find that someone will be hanging on your every word. In a more serious context, if you are somebody who is a writer, or you publish things, or you communicate in your day job, you could go through quite the period over the next 4 months. But it is also important to be conscious of the role of Jupiter and the North Node in your 12th house. Because the mutable energy of your sign can see you very flexing, but it's also very important to stay in touch with the more emotional dimension of your nature. And because Pluto's in the 9th house as this begins in terms of your solar chart, that's very trenchant when it comes to your philosophies and ideas. So as much as you can use the velvet glove to articulate those ideas, you need to know where some of them are coming from, because if they're coming from any kind of wound or vulnerability or resentment, however charming or artful you are in expressing your ideas, I think people will see that. So very important to stay tuned into the fact that your ruler, Mercury, is aligned with Uranus, which can be creating quite a lot of turbulent nervous energy at the present time. And although you can be very charming, it needs to be directed in a meaningful way. So what you say really should be what you truly mean. And that brings us to Cancer. Now for you, it's really very positive, because when Venus makes its way through the second solar house, I can say with some conviction that usually will trigger some improvement around people's sense of wealth, whatever their wealth is standing at. But I think some money can come to you over the next 4 months, but you're also being asked not to be frivolous with it. Generosity is one of the greatest gifts people can have, and it's much better to be generous to a fault than mean to a fault. But if you have some kind of abundance over the next 4 months, it's vital that you don't share that too swiftly. Have any uplift in your coffers, and really savour how that feels, because that is going to add a sense of security. Now Leo, for you, of course, you're already enormously gorgeous. There's nobody as alluring, attractive, striking as you. And of course, I've got my midheaven in Leo, and Uranus conjunct my midheaven also in Leo. So Leo people I get on extremely well with, and you can be extraordinarily generous, and particularly to good causes. Look out for those people who are not having such a good time. But I think this is a time for you to be thinking about what makes you unique and individual, because if I saw any weakness in, or any slight chink in your armour, it's that sometimes you need a nudge from someone else or some kind of collaboration in order to get your personal skill set moving forwards. So if you feel a bit stuck at the moment, particularly with the Sun in your 12th house, and Mercury set to move there also very soon, I feel that this could be just creating a little bit of a lag. So whatever talents you've got, whatever gorgeousness you possess, whatever flair, whatever sex appeal you have, turn it up to max. Go for it. Don't be too fearful about what other people feel. This is a time to walk out of your comfort zone and impress people. And if there are some rejections along the way, try to take these in your stride, because sometimes unless we take some kind of risk, we will never know. So we can stay, especially for fixed signs, tucked up in our cocoon, but if we don't extend ourselves outside of it, we don't achieve true joy. So the challenge there for you is to go for it. But because you've got Mars with Venus as this begins, what a combination, because that gives you a lot of thrust to go with the more sophisticated charm of Venus. But remember, you also have Pluto in your 7th house. So if there is someone you're drawn towards, what a combination. That gives you a lot more power potential. But of course, it has to be used correctly. Now that brings us to Virgo. For you, Venus and initially Mars being in your 12th house could create some challenges, because I think for some Virgo people, there could be a sense of nostalgia about people who are no longer with you. Now that could be people who've passed over, loved ones, or it could also be in a romantic context. So some Virgos could be thinking very much about an old flame, an old alliance, an old relationship. Now I'm not dismissing that you could investigate where that person is or what they're doing now, but what I would say, unless you feel you've significantly moved on and evolved since that relationship didn't work out, I wouldn't really go there. So if your reality is pretty similar now to when it was when the relationship finished, it's probably the case that you'd have to flex quite a lot to allow for wherever that other person is. Now, they may have moved on a lot to perhaps, as you see it, catch up with you, but there's no guarantee of that. So I feel before you put yourself through the torture of trying to dig out an odd relationship and solve it, you really need to be sure that on both sides there's been a lot of inner work before you do that. However, it's also possible that if you're single, someone could let you know over the next 4 months about their interest in you, but they may not articulate it. So watch out for non-verbal communication, those social cues, the way people just are glancing at you or perhaps glancing away. There may be a colleague who's very shy but is actually very drawn to you. So that's something for you to look out for. But if you are in a relationship which is not going quite to plan, I feel if there are any psychological issues there where you feel that the other person isn't entirely in your corner, the loyalty is not 100%, I think those relationships will need to be scrutinized in this period of time. Now, Libra, of course, Venus is your ruler, and the sign of Leo for you is the most sociable sector of your situation. Now, Venus starts this process in an opposition with Pluto, just in your 5th house. Well, that's just going to up your desire to improve your lot, whatever it may be. But once Pluto inverses back into Capricorn, you're going to start to feel, particularly in July, with a big clash between the Sun and Pluto that goes across a new moon. I feel that some of the issues that came up a few years ago could be repeated. So just be aware of not giving away your power too easily, because you can be a tremendously attentive person, very aware of other people's needs, anticipating them, doing things for others, and it's the most wonderful thing. But if it's not appreciated, it just leaves you feeling invisible and empty and worthless. So the lessons of Pluto moving through Capricorn since 2008 for 15 years until the 23rd of March this year are ones you should not forget, because if you do, you're going to get an immediate reminder through week 3 of July. So just be aware of that. But that apart, there could be a connection that comes from some kind of gathering, an introduction through a friend, a shared interest, a sports team that you support, some kind of collective effort. And of course, there are so many dating apps these days. I'm sure that that's the way a lot of people go. But I feel if you can get involved in something where there's a kinship, that's much better for you to demonstrate your natural graciousness and diplomacy and charm, and where you can work out people a little bit, because remember, you're an air sign, so communication is the most important thing for you. Now, Scorpio, for you, this influence is going to be very much about your career. It doesn't mean to say it can't be about relationships. I feel that if you're in a relationship that's going well, this event, particularly with your modern ruler so involved in it, and not that far away from an opposition with your traditional ruler, I think that can give you a lot of drive. So if a relationship's been going well, but you want to take it to the next stage of commitment, or getting a home together, or starting a family, this can be an auspicious period for you. But I feel for a lot of Scorpios, especially if you're a creative person, the next 4 months can be a wonderful time to raise your profile, to up your vibration, to achieve more recognition for what makes you unique. Because although you can be very direct and punchy in your communications to people that you encounter, when it comes to talking to people in positions of influence or authority, that shyer side of your nature can prevail. This is a time to give it loud about what makes you special. And in terms of a relationship, I think if you're single, don't be surprised if you forge a connection with someone from a different age group. I wouldn't dismiss either older or younger. It just depends on where you are in your life journey. And you could also meet someone through a professional situation. Now, Sagittarius, for you, obviously the sign of Leo is a fire sign like yours, and this event occurs in your 9th solar house, very redolent of the core energies of your sign. So about exuberance, expansion, travel, being very adventurous, being prepared to go for it. And what a dramatic time could unfold for you. It really could be very exciting. I feel that the energy that's going on in the sign of Taurus, however, is just reminding you that however much you may want to live in the moment, especially if you're someone who enjoys travel, backpacking, being a very freedom-loving archer, just be aware that that pack of energy in Taurus is asking you to be more conscious of your obligations and responsibilities, and you probably can't dismiss those completely. But just by taking a little bit of a walk on the wild side, you could have a very raunchy time ahead in the next 4 months. But you know, if you're in a relationship that isn't working, you can find yourself having a strong desire to get to the truth of what it's really about, particularly through the retrograde. So I feel that it is possible you could want to break away from something that you feel is too cloying, too inhibiting, stopping you breathe in the way that you want. Now Capricorn, for you, wow, Venus and Mars are in house 8. That's very hot. Could be described with another word beginning with H, which you can work out for yourself. But very sensual. This is very scorpionic, but with the pride of Leo and the fire of Leo. So if there's someone that you're very invested in, the chances are you're going to get a lot closer over the next 4 months. That could be merging your resources, doing some kind of property or financial arrangement together. Maybe it is that you're going to, in an existing relationship, find that the flame of attraction can burn much brighter. But if one of you is much more detached and cooler about being more intimate, I feel that that's going to be tested out through July, and particularly in week 3, when Saturn, your ruler, goes opposite Mars, which by that time is in your sector of the freedom-loving part of your nature. So there could be some big discussions that occur in July, and some of that could really feed into when the retrograde to Venus occurs. When it comes to your business situation, I feel if you are in a creative sector, money could slow down a little bit, unfortunately, through the 44-day retrograde. But of course, with Jupiter in a wonderful part of your situation, the 5th house, that's very much about risk, very Leonian really. But just be aware that with Pluto stepping back into your sign, of just all the ins and outs of any opportunities that come up, you need to calibrate them very carefully before making any binding decisions. Which brings us to Aquarius. Wow. Well, whether it's to do with work, interactions just generally around you, people you encounter in friendship groups, in the local pub or bar or club, or some kind of community centre, your graciousness is going to be amplified hugely with Venus's help. That's absolutely, indubitably so. So if you're single, I think your chances of meeting someone are definitely increased quite significantly over the next 4 months. But also we can meet someone, and Venus in the 7th house is very much more Libra. Pardon me. This can see us making way a little bit, making allowances for the other person's situation. Don't make too many allowances. Pluto's reminding you that it's important to stay true to who you are. So just be conscious of that. But Mars being there as well, that's great for setting our boundaries in the 7th house. But it can be a bit more rugged and abrasive when it is a situation which isn't going quite as well. So through the last 10 days of June, Mars is actually in a square with your modern ruler of Uranus. So if there is an issue around a relationship, should show itself really in the last third of that month. But I think the Cazimi, right at the heart of August, could be very heartwarming for you. And if you are looking for a relationship, I really wish that for you. If you're in a relationship, it's all about celebrating the things you have in common rather than focusing on the things that make you different. But that said, you have to feel that a relationship is reciprocal. So it doesn't mean to say it has to be quid pro quo. You do this, they match you by doing something almost identical. That's actually really quite boring and dull. It's just if both partners feel the other is really all in and doing their best in terms of their skills, their aptitude, their time or money, then you really can draw a lot closer together. If that's not the case, chinks could be shown. Which brings us to Pisces. Well, for you this occurs in house 6, so the thing to say straight away is that your diplomacy could show itself around your work over the next 4 months in quite a big way. But equally, you could meet someone in an incredibly ordinary location. Sometimes we feel, perhaps if we're older, that the type of places you would meet someone would probably be a bar, a club, maybe through work. But of course, with digital technology, there's a lot more chatting, flirting, interacting goes on through online connections. But I feel that whether you are someone who does something for others, you know, whether you're working in a role which does support people, that kind of goodwill that you can create can be just as important in a romantic situation. It just seems not very sexy. But I feel that if you are in a relationship, certainly getting a fair share of the domestic load between the two partners is going to be a great way to ensure that this event goes off well. If there is one person who tends to do a lot more, and remember, you can be very self-sacrificing, that can lead you to then become very resentful. So rather than be resentful, set your boundaries, and setting those boundaries will get a lot easier once Mars moves into Virgo, because what that's going to do on the 10th of July is help you to be more robust about what you will and won't do. But before then, I think a little bit of give and take probably is going to be important. If you're in a relationship, watch the 6th house energy of being too desiring of perfection. It just doesn't exist. We can all spend ages looking for it, particularly in relationships. So some kind of acceptance or point of understanding of why someone reacts or is triggered in certain ways can be a way that you can help your relationship, even in an unspoken way, because you can just observe how someone may respond in certain situations and see that it's not actually personal to you. It's just because they're stressed, or it is activating some past hurt or situation from their past. So that just about sums up the a magnificent Venus making its way through the wonderful Leo from June the 5th to October the 9th. Thank you so much for joining me. Please do like, comment or subscribe.